Wolf Theiss Soundshot. Insights and analysis from one of the leading law firms in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. Today's topic is AI in dispute resolution, with specific case examples of how AI is currently relied on in the legal sphere, as well as the legal permissibility of the use of AI in dispute resolution. Our speakers are disputes experts Aleksandar, Ristic, and Borna, Dejanovic. Enjoy the discussion.
Dear listeners, welcome to a new episode of Wolf Theiss Soundshot podcast. My name is Aleksandar. I'm an attorney at law cooperating with Wolf Theiss office in Belgrade, Serbia. And together with me today, I have my dear colleague Borna Dejanovic from Wolf Theiss office in Zagreb, Croatia. Hi, Borna.
Hi, Aleksandar. Thank you for having me and happy to be here.
The title of our today's podcast episode is Artificial Intelligence in Dispute Resolution, which illustrates our desire to engage in a fruitful and hopefully interesting discussion about today's ever-increasing use of various AI tools in legal practice, as well as to try to touch upon many different topics, both legal and practical, concerning the use of such AI tools. So, Borna, why is the use of AI a topic for us today? Is it something that we're discussing only on a theoretical level, or is it actually something that we see being used in legal practice today?
Thank you, Aleksandar. And I would say that this topic is in the focus of our interests, not because of theoretical discussions, but exactly because of the practical implications and the ever-increasing use of AI tools, not only by the general public and in a variety of sectors, but also with respect to legal profession and specifically dispute resolution. So AI tools can technically and practically significantly increase efficiency and productivity in the work of legal professionals. They automate work processes and they streamline and facilitate time-consuming tasks and lead to better allocation of resources in the daily work of legal professionals.
Yes, I fully agree with your assessment, and that's actually the exact reason why this is a topic, because even in our work, we see this being used every day on a higher level. So maybe for the benefit of our listeners, maybe we should just briefly try to explain what these AI tools are. One of the first things that comes up to my mind when we're discussing what this type of generative AI is to think of a phrase artificial intelligence. And I would like to consider whether we have actually reached the stages of technological development and human advance that we see in those sci-fi novels and movies. And I always like to consider whether this is a real artificial intelligence, under quotation marks, that can feel, think, and reason independently from the human creators. And in short, the answer would be no. The AI that we're discussing today is actually called generative AI, and they're advanced algorithms designed to process and generate text on patterns that they've learned from scanning large sets of data. And these models can generate creative and quite interesting responses. However, they do not have personal emotions, nor any set of belief or self-awareness. They operate on the basis of various patterns and machine learning techniques that have been used in their training process. It's still a type of artificial intelligence because it creates new data, something that can be original and never seen before. However, it is always tied to the source on which the AI has been trained. So this creativity part is something that differentiates actually the generative AI from the previous type of computer programs and software that we have been seeing. And this is actually the main reason why these new AI tools are actually becoming more and more relevant for different type of work, including the legal profession, because they can actually contribute something new and bring something new to the table that we as lawyers have a need for. So having in mind this brief explanation of how these tools work and what they actually are, I suggest, Borna, that we go for a brief moment into a discussion on some practical aspects of how we use these AI tools. Have you used ChatGPT? What were your experiences?
Yes, I have seen these AI tools in use both with colleagues, and I have personally tried to see how this operates in practice. If I can briefly just start with sort of explaining how AI tools can be utilized in the legal profession, and more specifically in dispute resolution work. If we can start from the basic uses of AI, such as machine translations, which are the most basic and most frequent example of using AI tools with machine learning background that is facilitating more complex translations of higher quality, as well as document automation, which was used throughout the past years as sort of an advanced mechanic of AI softwares in the legal profession. Now, with respect to dispute resolution, we can see that AI tools are being more and more used and are becoming more and more complex tools and platforms that can really facilitate legal work. For instance, AI tools can be used in the preparation of submissions, oral presentations, or even witness testimonies. They can be utilized for the preparation of submissions, consideration of potential arguments and counter arguments. They can simplify document review, identify key materials and hot documents and large bulks of documents, which are often scrutinized by legal professionals. You can also use the assistance of AI tools to locate case information in big amounts of documents, often voluminous case files, such as briefs or transcripts. AI tools can be used to assess and address the legal position and potential case strategies by the opposing parties, even assess probabilities of success in certain cases based on previous knowledge about similar cases of similar factual and legal background, even the completion and preparation of comprehensive legal researches. And obviously, the most common use recently is to more easily identify and summarize legal sources and case law. In this respect, I also know that some of the leading players on the global legal market are now attempting to integrate complex, specific, innovative AI platforms tailored for legal work in their operations, not only for dispute resolution, but also for a variety of other specific legal projects and legal matters. Now, with respect to my specific experience, I tried to use these AI tools just to check whether and how these tools would react and what results they would produce following my work on a specific case. So actually, what I tried is an experiment to see whether the results of my legal analysis actually facilitated would result in a similar or an equal work product that I prepared. And unfortunately, I'm not quite sure whether this was indeed the result I was desiring, because although I received some similar results and based on my inquiry about the specific legal issue, which the AI tool responded in the same fashion as I did, I had some examples where the result was completely opposite. And this is the reason why I think we cannot completely rely without prudence and subsequent verification whether indeed the results which AI tools produce are usable without a human element behind this entire project and this entire idea of AI tools.
Agreed. I mean, from my perspective, I mean, obviously also being someone dealing with various disputes in everyday practice, one of my favorite uses of these AI tools, most, specifically ChatGPT, because I guess it's open to everyone, is to try to use it as a sort of a smart search engine. I try to save time by using ChatGPT. So if I'm, for instance, interested in some compliance regulations in Japan or US or whatever, because that might be relevant for the dispute which I'm dealing with, instead of going and searching through traditional search engines like Google and then just trying on my own to identify the key points, I consult ChatGPT. I get a very high-level summary of what the AI tool believes is important for my review. And of course, that I use as a starting ground for actually trying to identify those specific regulations, whether something exists or not. So I think that as you have summarized it, there are different types of uses for all of these AI tools. But coming back to your comment regarding the accountability behind the use of these AI tools and the supervision which needs to be provided, I guess we all know already that there are certain famous or infamous cases that exist across the globe. and that have shown us both the benefits, but also the risks of using AI without ensuring a proper supervision.
That's correct. And as you correctly stated, I would prefer to stick to infamous cases. And this was quite prominently featured in the media covering the legal profession. And specifically, I think we're both referring to the case in the US, which attracted quite a media attention related to the use of AI in dispute resolution. Without going into specific details of the case, some of our colleagues tried and attempted to use AI tools to prepare and produce legal documents, submissions that were submitted to the court without proper verification whether indeed all the legal aspects, legal issues, and more specifically case law that was referred to in these submissions was actually true and correct. In the US, there was a major scandal, if we can call it so, where lawyers have submitted a submission in court proceedings without actually running through the submission and verifying that the case law which they referred to was indeed correct. And it was not correct, it was not accurate, it was not even real. And these AI tools, for some reason, which are unknown to us, have completely invented a case law by even referring to real judges and referring to even real actual cases, but this was completely incorrect and not referring to real life. And ultimately, the judge that was conducting the case was reviewing this case law that was referred to in the submission and found out that that case law did not even exist, and that case law referred to incorrect legal statements and arguments presented by the counsel. So our colleagues ultimately got fined because of this misconduct, and they were even urged to apologize to the judges that were referred to in their submission as having produced certain case law, which was simply incorrect. This is something which is really an unfortunate development. However, in my view, this can also be seen as a positive thing, as it can be construed as an early wake-up call for all of us, and it can serve as a reminder not to overly rely on AI tools without extreme caution, prudence, and obviously without applying increased diligence and verifying what AI actually produces is indeed true and correct.
I completely agree. And that specific case that you have been explaining, I think it's quite important to try to explain that it is already creating reactions across the legal spectrum. For instance, there are already examples of courts in the United States issuing this type of standing orders or rules of procedure, basically requiring from legal counsel appearing before said courts to provide written statements testifying to the fact whether they have used generative AI tools in their work. And the purpose of this, of course, is the fact that the judges would like to know whether they're exposed to any risk of these AI tools being used in their proceedings, because as some judges put it, there are quite various dangers of using AI because they can make stuff up. They lack, and I cite this, duty, honor, or justice that binds lawyers practicing before the courts. So that's why I guess the courts in the United States have already taken it upon themselves to try to bring back this accountability element to the lawyers who are appearing before the courts, and in order to actually ensure that the process still keeps its integrity, as was the case thus far. But this ties us pretty nicely to the topic of how the AI is used. If we're discussing this, we also need to discuss how the AI can be used. And this leads us actually to the broad topic of whether the use of AI is regulated today. I know, for instance, in my jurisdiction, which is Serbia, there are no specific laws or regulations requiring you to engage in any type of specific behavior when you're using AI. But of course, that does not mean that, no rules are applicable. But I know that from the perspective of the EU, which is Croatia is a country, of course, which is a member of the EU. I guess, Borna, you are more aware of certain developments in the EU legislative framework that you can talk us briefly through.
Absolutely. Similar as with Serbia, in Croatia and in the European Union, there is no regulation governing the use of AI as of today. If we're speaking about the regulation of AI, the first thing that pops on my mind are the 3 laws of robotics as invented by an SF writer, Mr. Isaac Asimov, that could, by analogy, apply also to the use of AI tools in the modern world. And in a nutshell, these laws, as invented in the first half of the 20th century, actually stated that a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm, that a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And the third law is stipulating that a robot must protect its own existence, and as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or the second law. Now, moving back to the regulatory aspect, the EU's approach to artificial intelligence, as self-proclaimed by the European institutions, should center on excellence and trust and aiming to boost research and industrial capacity while ensuring safety and fundamental rights. And this is part of a broader digital transformation strategy and game plan of the European Union. And actually, the European Union is trying to implement a regulation on the use of AI through 3 streams. The first stream is actually the so-called EU AI Act, which should be the first ever legal framework on AI that is aiming to address the risks of specific uses of AI, categorizing the AI tools into 4 different levels of risks. In this respect, this legislation should also include specific requirements for generative AI tools, which we are talking about today, which would have to comply with some specific transparency requirements. And these are the disclosure that a content was actually generated by AI, that the model should be designed to prevent it from generating illegal content, and especially that copyrighted data used for the training of AI tools should be, so their summaries should be published. The second stream pursued by the European Union is actually the AI Liability Directive, which should primarily tackle the issues of disclosure of evidence and the burden of proof in cases of non-contractual fault-based civil claims for damages caused by an AI system. And the third stream is actually the revision of specific sectoral safety regulations already in place by the European Union. So there is no specific regulation that is covering this aspect yet, but we can expect some meaningful developments on the EU level, which would have to be also transposed on local levels across the EU member states, even by the end of this year. So I think this is an area that would have to be closely followed by us, as it will certainly change the overall regulatory regime in which we are operating right now. Now, despite the fact that there is no specific regulation addressing the use of AI, I would like to discuss with you what are your views on the other regulatory aspects and specifically some existing legal regimes which do not directly tackle AI, but that can also be considered relevant while using AI tools in our daily operations.
That's actually a great opening, because I briefly wanted to touch upon the fact that, of course, the topic of today's podcast episode is not merely the use of AI tools, but the use of them in the dispute resolution practice. And us being lawyers, of course, even if we're faced with circumstances where the use of AI as such is not specifically regulated, that does not mean that us as lawyers actually do not have certain type of rules which are binding us to act in accordance with certain principles and legal grounds, basically, that we accepted when becoming lawyers. So generally, something that is quite specific, not only for our profession, but I think our profession is quite known for it. We usually have these various type of codes of ethics and principles that we need to apply in our everyday work. And there are general principles that each lawyer must basically abide to when doing its work. And some of these principles should be assessed, at least from my perspective, when we're discussing the use of AI in our representation of clients or providing legal assistance. Some of these principles would be, for instance, the principle of honesty. I know that in the code of ethics of the Serbian bar, attorney is allowed to use allowed and honorable means for provision of its legal services, and the attorney basically cannot participate in any illicit manner for obtaining law. So if the AI tool is perhaps trained on the basis of some copyrighted data, which was not authorized to be used in the course of training for the AI tool, am I as a lawyer allowed to use such AI tool? Would I be exposed to the AI generating answers that exploit some type of legal or practical loopholes? So that's one aspect of the case that I'm always thinking about. And basically, this is something that also needs to be taken into account in future as well, because this leads us to the element of accountability of the attorney. The attorney is always accountable and responsible for legal advice given or any actions performed on behalf of the client. So is the attorney actually transferring accountability to the AI tool if it uses it in his work? And is the use of AI actually a benefit for the client or the benefit for the lawyer? I mean, these are all actually questions that come up to my mind when I'm discussing the use of AI in my work. Because if legal practitioners would resort solely to using these AI-generated suggestions, they might not fully engage with the complexities of the case. And that is why the clients are actually hiring us as human beings due to our expertise and knowledge. And of course, one of the most important elements in this discussion is the element of confidentiality, because I believe that sharing any type of confidential information with the AI is a big no. We are not actually sure how this data is being used. Even if we have information from the creators of these AI tools that the input which we provide is not being used with other users, it's still, I think, something that's quite in the black, and there is no significant transparency of that aspect for me to be able to fully believe that these type of interactions with AI tools are okay from the perspective of the ethical principles that bind me as a lawyer. So when we're discussing this transparency part, maybe you can just give us a brief outlook on what you see as being the main risks with respect to these training processes and the use of AI tools.
Thank you, Aleksandar, for these interesting considerations, and I fully agree with your view. As to the transparency aspect, this is indeed something which could be problematic and which also, in my view, causes some concerns with respect to the use of AI tools. So we really are in the dark, as you correctly noted, about the way how AI tools are actually trained. And these can be trained on sensitive legal or dispute-related data. And the privacy aspect is indeed something that is really, really relevant here. And in my daily operations, I see major concerns by clients with using any type of AI related tools, including machine translation software, because if you're feeding in sensitive data, which may violate privacy of the clients, this is something that can be problematic. And the other aspect is also copyrighted or other intellectual property rights, which may also come into play and may be seen as a problematic aspect. And without really knowing how the AI tools were actually trained and what grounds and what sources they are actually using in producing a work product, we are quite being in a risky position while using this without having any deeper knowledge about actually the transparency protocols applicable to these AI tools. And in this respect, I hope and I presume that the regulatory regime that would actually be established throughout the European Union and hopefully and presumably across the globe will facilitate and help mitigating these risks in our daily operations. Also, just to briefly address your view about the liability aspect, of course, we as lawyers have to put our signature to a legal submission, and we are taking the responsibility both towards the client and towards the judiciary. The other aspect is how this could be regulated internally if we would be actually utilizing on a contractual basis some specific AI tool. But again, this is something which we will see how it will be developing in light of the close approaching fresh regulatory regime applicable to the AI.
And that's actually a really good transition to the closing remarks I think that we should raise regarding the topic today, and that is what is the future of the use of AI? What are the prospects? And is AI actually the future of dispute resolution work? Should the lawyers fear the AI, or can the AI influence the perception of lawyers as legal advisors? What is your opinion?
Well, from a general perspective, and I'm basing my comments on some researches conducted by the EU throughout the recent period, almost 15% of jobs in OECD countries are highly automatable, and another approximately 30% of workplaces could face substantial changes by the use of AI. And AI tools may also result in increasing labor productivity even up to 35%. So this is certainly something which cannot be ignored, and which will certainly have a significant change on the daily operations in various business segments, including the legal profession. Now, specifically with respect to the legal profession, there are, as we discussed, various uses that can really facilitate and streamline the operations in our daily work. And in my view, I think we should not fear that AI would completely take over the role of lawyers and that we would end up jobless in several years. But I think AI is more likely to complement our work and actually allow lawyers to focus on more relevant legal aspects of our work, which require actually human judgment, creativity, empathy. And this is something which, in my view, at least on the short term, cannot be replaced by AI. And in this respect, I recall a scene from the James Bond movie Skyfall, where Bond meets his new quartermaster. And his new quartermaster says that he can do more damage on his laptop sitting in his pajamas before his first cup of Earl Grey than Bond can actually do in a year in the field. And then Bond asks, so why do you need me? And Q responds that every now and then a trigger has to be pulled. And Bond actually responds, or not pulled, because it's hard to know which decision should be made while Q is sitting in his pajamas. And this is actually an illustrative example that despite the very useful nature of AI tools, there would always have to be a human being behind it, because these non-machine related aspects and human judgment, creativity, and empathy always have to be present to make a right strategic call while practicing dispute resolution. What are your views on this, Aleksandar?
I fully agree. I believe that the AI has a strong future in our work. I think that it's something that will be increasingly more used in everyday practice, and I think that will be rightfully so. The various practical uses which we have mentioned, including both the positive and negative cases, show us that the AI will weave its way through our profession. And that's, I think, something that we should embrace as lawyers, because innovation is not something that we should fear. Actually, it's something that we should welcome and try to use it to the best benefit of our capabilities. Human checks, of course, is something that's a very specific difference and something that's quite important in our profession, because our creativity and our expertise is something that differentiates us not only from the AI tools, but actually from each other. Because otherwise you can go to any lawyer and pretty much expect the same level of legal service, which we know it's not the case. So I believe that for as long as us as humans are always keeping that supervision level and are always trying to direct the tools that are available to us in order to reach certain means, I think that the use of AI will become increasingly more and more beneficial for us. And of course, having in mind that any dispute involves not only pure legal aspects, but also some complex parts like human emotions and relationship and unique contacts and some type of facts that have not been seen before, meaning that the AI cannot, of course, even predict how to react to some type of situations. I think that the human element is definitely something that cannot be replaced in our profession, and something that will always guarantee that lawyers as such at least have a very specific position in everyday work of all other industries and sectors. So I fully agree with you. Human part will not go away. We should not fear the AI. And I think that all of these trends and then regulatory aspects are something that's quite interesting to see in future how they will develop. So both keeping in line with the legal trends, but also in line with the technology trends, because I'm sure that the majority of these tools will become even more useful and even better. So having said all of that, I think that this was quite a useful discussion, at least for me. So I would like to thank you, Borna, for your time.
Thank you very much, Aleksandar, for having me here. I think this was a productive and interesting discussions, and I think we covered some major topics of interest in relation to the use of AI in dispute resolution, and I certainly hope this was interesting to our listeners as well. I think we can close this session with a confirmation that this talk was not scripted by an AI tool today, but was actually produced by human beings, the two of us. And again, thank you for having me here. It was a pleasure discussing this topic with you.
Thank you as well. And to our listeners, thank you for staying with us at this special episode of Wolf Theiss Soundshot podcast. And of course, we will try to keep the interesting topics coming and are looking forward to speaking again. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Wolf Theiss Soundshot. For more information, you can contact us via email at soundshot@wolftheiss.com or visit our website at www.wolftheiss.com.